We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow on Twitter at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
I'm really good. It feels like a very nice evening. We've been talking off air with our lovely guest, which I know you will formally introduce. But I always think podcasting is one of those strange things where you can talk to sort of very well-known people, and people seem very generous with their time when it comes to a podcast. So we've had some great guests, but selfishly, this is probably one that I've read more than anyone ever. And I don't think, Tommy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure you're a Philly local either.
Yeah.
So we've got three guys, one from Oklahoma, one from London. Was it Boston? Were you a New England boy, if I recall correctly?
North Carolina.
And then you've got us three talking about the Eagles. But if you're an Eagles fan over the past 10, 15 years and you've not read any of Tommy's stuff, I will be amazed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. It's been a while, Tommy, since I've heard you on a podcast. I must admit, it used to be a very sort of routine part of my listening was you and Kempski. So it's pretty cool to chat to you in person.
I'm glad to be here. Always good to talk to you guys. Yeah, Kempski and I had some good times in the past, and I probably need to get more active in the podcast world. But yeah, looking forward to our conversation today.
Breaking news, Shane. Tommy back in the podcast game. Get that in the that's the way it works these guys. Get that in the podcast header.
We've got a place for you, Tommy. So yeah, we are joined by Tommy Lawor from EaglesBlitz.com. I'm sure that you don't need me to tell you to go check out his work, but if by some chance you've not ever stumbled across Eagles Blitz, IGGLES Blitz.com, you need to go check that out. Tommy is the first guy that I consistently read for Eagles coverage. I don't know, 10 years ago, whenever I was first starting to really get it. It was probably more than 10 years ago, but when I was first starting to get into the Eagles, and I mentioned before we started that I remember scrolling through one of his articles one day and one of my tweets popped up on there and I was like, oh my gosh, I might've made it. So it was a really surreal moment, but be sure you're following him on Twitter at Lawlor NFL. Go check out his written work. It's fantastic stuff. And Tommy, we're excited to have you on the show today. And we got 10 questions we want to ask you, a little bit of recap of last year, kind of moving through the off season and into the 2025 season as well. So let's just jump in. And our first question we want to know is, when you look back at the Eagles Super Bowl winning season last year, what do you think was what was the turning point for that season that really set them apart and propelled them on to that Super Bowl victory?
Well, a lot of people point to the bye week, and I think there's kind of a misconception that the Eagles went and magically solved a lot of problems during the bye week. And if you think about the bye week, the Eagles, they got off to the 2-2 start. And so you had the couple of games where A.J. Brown was out. That's always going to cause a problem for this offense because A.J. is such a crucial part. Zach Bond, as well as he played in the season opener, if you rewatch the Falcons game, Zach Bond struggled. Their cut blocking, my man had never seen cut blocks like that. And it showed. He was bad in that game, just flat out bad. And, then all of a sudden you come out of the bye week, you've got A.J. Brown back. You've got Zach Bond who's really starting to figure things out. Cooper DeJean enters the lineup and takes over the slot. And the other thing, Mekhi Becton at that point had a handful of games under his belt, so the offense started to click. And so really I think whether there had been a bye week or not, I think just that collection of time and experience, getting people healthy and getting people on the same page, that's when they started to ascend. And then later in the year, let's be honest about Jalen Hurts. He wasn't at his best in the middle of the season, right? He started to click later in the season. I don't know if it was something between him and Kellen Moore, him and the players, or just him adjusting to being in such a run-heavy offense, because that was unusual. But as Jalen started to pick his game up, that's when all of a sudden the Eagles win the NFC Championship by 32 points and have a 34-point lead in the Super Bowl. The team from Week 5 isn't blowing those teams out, right? But they continued to get better and just were a juggernaut by the end of the season.
Yeah, man. The when I think back to like the point that I was like, oh, the Eagles might be really good. I think back to that Ravens game when Cooper DeJean rallied and tackled. I think it was Derrick Henry, the little swing pass to the flat. I think it just dropped him. I was like, man, our slot corner just owned Derrick Henry. This defense might just be phenomenal.
It's one of the few times that Derrick Henry, there's the old joke, would you rather be the hammer or the nail? That's one of the few times when Derrick Henry was the nail. And little Cooper DeJean from Iowa, the rookie from Iowa, just puts that Hall of Famer on his butt. And you sat there and said, wow, okay, that's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. And yeah, you're right. That's when you said, all right, this defense is different. This is not just a little hot streak against some bad quarterbacks. This defense is legit.
Yeah. Jonny, was there a moment that really stuck out for you other than the ones we already mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased because I never get to go to games, obviously, and I managed to travel. It was late October, and I watched the Eagles beat the Bengals in their own stadium. And I remember watching the first drive of that game, and I don't know how well you guys remember it, but Joe Burrow just completely rinsed us. It was just down the field. It was like 5-yard completion, 5-yard completion, 5-yard completion. And I was thinking, this defense just doesn't have the juice. And then the offense got going, and it was like, wow. And that was the moment when I realized the offense fully had it. And the defense started to put it together against a good team, but the offense that was it. And I remember watching it thinking, yeah, this offense could be really good. I think that was Jalen's first really good game of the season. I don't think he miscompleted. I don't think there was many incompletions. And even the ones that I think were incomplete weren't bad plays. They killed them at the end. And what I remember about it was, I think that was the game when there was another running back who nearly scored a touchdown at the end. I don't know if a penalty pulled it back or something happened, but I remember just the Bengals were broken. And they weren't a great team at that time, the Bengals, but they were still a very talented team. And it felt like the Eagles just had their way with them. And it was very early on. There was still a long way to go. But I remember, and obviously I was there live. So as I said, I'm biased. But I remember watching that. And then, of course, it came crashing down a little bit because the Jags game was very ropey the day after that. But I will always have very fond memories of the second half of that Bengals game and thinking that I was watching a team that were very, very good. And you're right, Shane. The Ravens game really did feel like a little turning point as well.
And the Bengals game, if you remember the first touchdown, they got Jamar Chase, they got him on, was it Brandon Graham or somebody like that?
It was an edge, wasn't it? Yeah. It was in the flat, wasn't it? Yeah.
And the reactions on Twitter to any Eagles thing are either best team ever or complete bunch of idiots. Why do we hire these guys? And so Twitter was ripping, Fangio is such a genius. He's trying to cover the best receiver in the league with a pass rusher. Why do we hire this guy?
Yeah.
The counter thought that you sit there and said, Cincinnati ran their best play, their best red zone play on that drive, and it worked. And guess what? They that's burned. That best play ain't going to be run again, not against the Eagles. We've seen it. And so things had to go really perfect for them to go down and score on that drive, and they did. And you're right, they went right through them. But they ran that script they had rehearsed and practiced. They ran their best play to get a touchdown. And then once the game settled into a true back and forth, that's when all of a sudden the defense started to take over. And that was the other great Cooper DeJean tackle. Jamar Chase catches on a 4th and 1. He tackles him in the flat for a loss.
Yeah.
And again, that's where he said, all right, this guy's legit. And they held the Bengals to under 300 yards offense in that game. Yeah. And because that's the question we always have. We saw the defense under Jonathan Gannon have some awesome games, but it's usually against crappy quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you get to the Super Bowl, rarely do crappy quarterbacks show up. The NFC Championship, same thing. Unless you're not Brock Purdy and you're facing Josh Johnson, you're generally going to beat a good quarterback. And so that's always the fear with the defense. Or can they do it against a good quarterback? When they beat Joe Burrow, you said, all right, that's a dude, man. That's a good quarterback. They beat Jamar Chase. They beat an offense that could score. So that was another sign that we can take this defense as differently than the defenses of the past where Jonathan Gannon's bullies would just dominate Tommy Cutlets or whatever moron they went up against, but they would struggle the first time that they were facing a Pro Bowl quarterback.
That was exactly that, wasn't it? It was the first drive felt so Gannon-like. And I remember being there.
It was the 17-play, 70-yard touchdown drive. And
bear in mind, Yeah, I've probably become one of those fans, Tommy, that you mentioned that was like sack him because I was definitely a few drinks in on a holiday that I very much enjoying myself. But I remember feeling like I was back in Gannonland because it was so easy. But actually, in hindsight, there was a lot of third downs. There was a lot. I think there was a couple of fourth downs. It was a bit of a. It was a struggle. We won't spend too long talking about the Bengals game, but yeah, Jamar Chase had 9 catches for 54 yards.
Amazing.
And Jamar Chase is one of the best vertical receivers we've seen in the past 10 years.
For my money, he's the best receiver in football these days.
Yeah, that must be his lowest for any game where he's ever had more than like 2 or 3 catches. That has to be the fewest amount of yards he's ever had. Like, that's a ridiculous stat line, really.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And you're right to point out against a good quarterback because the Eagles had not proven that. And Burrow is an exceptionally good quarterback. And that felt like maybe the team was turning the corner.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's one of those things that as I'm watching the Bengals game, I was getting really frustrated on that opening drive, but I was also like, man, if you consistently get a team into third and medium and they convert, like eventually that's going to just run out. And it just feels like that's how Fangio played those opening drives. I mean, you even look at the Rams game in the playoffs. I think it was like a 14-play scoring drive to open the game for the Rams. And the Commanders, the NFC Championship game was like an 18-play scoring drive to open the game. And it's like, hey, if you can make them burn all of those plays on the opening drive, I think that bodes well for you. But I could definitely feel the Bengals game was the first time it happened. And I could feel the blood pressure rising. But by the time we got to like the playoffs, it was just like, whatever. Fangio will figure it out.
Right. Well, I think so many people forget that first drive. You know, that's that scripted drive where they've spent the whole week trying to say, what are the best plays? What do we think is going to work? And the defense, I think, sometimes kind of says, okay, let's keep things simple. Let's let things play out, and then as we'll adjust as we go along. But you don't want to show your best stuff on the first drive because then what are you going to do the rest of the game? Well, offenses like to show their best stuff on the first drive to get going. And if you can just get past that, settle in, and then you start playing each other, all of a sudden, usually the better unit starts to take over. And it's just having gone through the Gannon years and some years in the past, when that opening drive goes well, you start to panic and go, oh, shit, is this going to be those games where it's like this for 4 quarters? But, yeah, Fangio and that defense earned our trust by a certain point. You said, hey, it's the opening drive. Let them do it. They're going to get their touchdown, and that's not a problem. Being down 7-0 is not going to be a problem.
Yeah, and then we'll adjust, which was what was lacking in 2022. But we didn't come here just to slander Jonathan Gannon. So let's spin it forward into the offseason. And this one wasn't on the rundown, but it's fairly breaking news. And I know you have a piece out on it already, Tommy. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles working out this multi-year extension with Nick Sirianni?
Well, it's great news, obviously, because he's proven to be, as I put in the piece I wrote, he's proven to be the right coach for the Eagles. And, you know, we can argue, you know, is he the best coach in the NFL, the 3rd best, the 5th best, the 9th best, whatever it is. But he's the right coach for the Eagles. He got that team to maximize their ability last year, played a super high level, delivered a Super Bowl. The 2022 team, you know, got to the Super Bowl. And let's be honest, if that team plays on anything other than a skating rink in a Super Bowl, they got a really good chance to win that game, you know. So the guy has proven he's a legitimately good coach. 2023 was a strange season, unlike anything I've ever been around. And he managed to get past that, made the necessary changes, has got some good coordinators, and the players really connect with him. So this is a guy you want to keep around. You're not just going to replace him with somebody else and get the same results. He connects with these players and he gets them to play at a high level. So really, really happy that they were able to work something out, and happy for Nick. He's deserved it. You know, he's for a coach who's won as much as he has, he's taken a lot of flack. Some of it deserved, some of it not. But he's taken a lot. So, you know, listen, my man, he delivered a Super Bowl. Now he's got a big contract, so he can go buy some Air Jordans or whatever it is he loves from the 1980s and 90s and have a little fun and relax for about 10 minutes and then get right back into grinding and get ready for the upcoming season.
Can go buy some more Phillies jerseys and
there you go.
To wear to press conferences. Yeah, I've got some tweets about Sirianni that don't necessarily need to resurface, but you know, kudos to Nick, because I'm one of the guys that thought that they should have let him go after the 2023 season and carried that into 2024. But the way the team was able to bounce back is undeniable. And he seems to be a perfect culture fit for the Eagles. I still get frustrated with him at times, but I think that's just always going to be the case when you're passionate about a team. And and stuff. But he did a phenomenal job down the stretch in 2024. And it's really nice that they're not in the same position they were in 2022, losing both coordinators. You just have to try to replace it on one side of the ball this year, and we'll see how that goes. But Jonny, any thoughts you want to chime in on the Sirianni extension?
Yeah, I'll have to sort of control myself because I think I could do about half an hour on Sirianni's extension. I genuinely might write something for BGN because some of the stuff I see online has annoyed me this week, which I shouldn't get annoyed by people. But I mean, just basic, like BLG wrote about him this week. He's 5th in all-time win rate. He's 48-20 in the regular season, like the highest among NFL current head coaches. And then I see like people, as you said, Tommy, ranking like top 10, top 15, top 5. And I shouldn't care because it's the same as the QB debate. It doesn't matter. Tommy summed it up in a perfect way. And funny the way I say the exact same thing about Jalen Hurts. He might not be the best quarterback in the NFL, but he's probably the best quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I feel very similar about Sirianni right now. Would I change him for anyone? I mean, obviously there are better coaches out there, but I'm not sure I would. Same as Jalen Hurts. I genuinely don't know. I think as a culture wise, and the problem is I saw a tweet earlier on from someone who ranked him like 14th and he has like Dan Quinn above him. And I'm like, fair enough. If that's if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I've no statistical data points to you incorrect, but that's fine. But the quote was something like, I still don't know what he does. And it's this idea that he's like this bumbling buffoon who stumbles around the place and just has no like identity. Like CEOs of businesses, like people at the top of organizations, they matter. Like people still laugh about the Lions and Dan Campbell having no idea what's going on. And I'm like, the Lions have been exceptionally good under Dan Campbell, exceptionally good. The culture absolutely matters. And I find it quite frustrating. And the thing is, these are the kind of people that don't like the way the Eagles win as well. Often you get very schematic, like nerdy guys, like football nerds who want to see like the best scheme and not necessarily the best players. I mean, I don't like the Eagles very much because it's quite boring. It's like, oh, they're just really good because Saquon and AJ Brown are like too good and their offensive line's too good. So they don't win by scheme. They win by personnel. And it annoys the nerdy scheme guys because they want to see like this unbelievable play that someone's designed that Mike McDaniel's done and it doesn't actually win in the playoffs or et cetera, et cetera. And I find that Sirianni just still gets discredited. And the funny thing is these people will probably be right one day. In 2 years, Sirianni or 3 years will get fired and they'll go, see, I told you. And I'm like, well, that's just sports. Some of the best coaches in the world eventually get fired. Like nearly every coach eventually gets fired unless you're Mike Tomlin. And even Tomlin is running on empty in terms of playoff wins. Like it just happens in sports. It may be that in 4 years' time, the culture doesn't fit Sirianni anymore. And we do want to move on to a different coach. Doesn't mean people were right about Sirianni. They were wrong. Like the proof is in whatever. He has won one Super Bowl. He's got to another Super Bowl in 3 years. He has the 5th highest or the 5th best winning percentage of any head coach. Like, I get it. And sometimes during the season, we can all get annoyed and people can question what he does. But I feel quite strongly about it. Like, I feel very similar about Hurts. He fits the team. He fits the organization. It's a very smart organization, Philly, possibly the best, if not one of the best. They know what they're doing. They would not extend him if they believed that he was this bumbling idiot. And I think a lot of it, in all honesty, goes back to, one, a little bit about his first ever press conference. I think people have just had that. I think NFL guys, there's so many guys that went on TV and said he's going to be the worst coach of all time. And we know people stick to their opinions and don't like to change them, which is a sad thing about sports media. But it's like, I saw Jeffrey Lurie's statement and he just said, we want a culture of championship and we want to foster an environment. And Nick is everything we embody in a head coach. Like, and that is how I feel about him. And is he going to draw up the best play on 3rd and 8? Probably not. But get someone else to do it. You can win in more ways than one. And the Eagles, the thing they're doing now is winning. So why the hell would you change it? You keep it ticking along. And yeah, I feel very, very strongly about the Sirianni thing. And again, it doesn't mean I'm saying he's going to be here for 10 years and be great. I feel like for what he's done, for what he's achieved, it's an absolute no-brainer. And the fact that people are even questioning it is sort of laughable to me. But there you go.
Yeah, totally agree. It is funny because people, you know, one of the coaches that gets a lot of worship in the football world is Bill Parcells. And Bill, when he won Super Bowls, he was a CEO head coach. He had Bill Belichick running his defenses, and he had different guys running his offenses. And so he was just there to set the culture, set the tone, run the ship. And he did a great job of that. And the Giants won 2 Super Bowls with him as the head coach. So, you know, you don't have to have a guy as a coach who's a play caller. You don't have to guy as a coach who's an X and O's genius. You need somebody who's right for that team. And Sirianni's messaging, that resonates with the players. And that absolutely has value because we know the stories we heard this week about Caleb Williams trying to watch film in Chicago and being left on his own and having no supervision, that's mind-boggling. That's coaching malpractice. Sirianni runs a tight ship. His coaches do their job. His players do their job. I just think a lot of people don't appreciate him, and hopefully they will over time. That narrative will change. Now, it's amazing when you put that finger up and it's got a ring on it, all of a sudden, a lot of those doubters have to just shut up because you got the ring. And God forbid he wins a second one. First of all, Nick will be a handful to deal with at that point. They'll make him the mayor of Jamestown, New York for forever. But we'll see what he does. I'm really curious to see how the next 5 years play out. This Eagles team has a lot of young talent. There's no reason this team can't compete for Super Bowls for the next 5 years. So it would be interesting. We could be having a very different discussion 5 years from now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's keep moving on to the Eagles draft class. The NFL draft's in the books. Picking from the last selection in each round makes the draft a little more difficult to navigate. But with all of that in mind, how do you grade? I don't know if some people hate draft grades, some people like them, but just overall, what were your thoughts about the Eagles draft class? And which rookie are you most excited to see in action this season?
So I'm not big into A's, B's, and C's, that kind of thing, because every draft is a little bit different based on when you pick, the needs you have, how many picks you have, things of that nature. But yeah, I came away pleased with the Eagles draft. It wasn't one of those drafts where I came away just madly in love with it. But to be honest with you, I have come away from drafts that I did love, and they turned out to be disastrous. So you really never do know. I thought that Howie did a good job of, the one downside to winning the Super Bowl is you're picking 32nd, right? That's the one time you're sitting there going, maybe you guys should have lost the wild card round or something. We could have picked 28. We could have got somebody better. But, with the players he was able to bring in, I think that the Eagles were a young team, and he brought in even more youth to keep this real competition for spots, real depth on this team, and to keep – they know if they're paying Jalen Hurts, they're going to have to pay Jalen Carter. They're paying Lane Johnson big money. They're paying Saquon big money, AJ big money. So they've got to have young, cheap options at a lot of spots. And I think Howie understands that situation, that you can't pay everybody big money. So the best way to do it, have a bunch of young guys competing for those role positions, those role player spots, and try to get the best ones there. And so I think he did a good job. I liked the class overall. And in terms of who I'm most excited, obviously Jihad Campbell would be the obvious answer because he's the first rounder. But I guess Andrew Makuba is what I'm kind of curious about, because second round safeties you can find some real good safeties there. And that's a position where he may be able to start right away, and could be an important position. Safety is a critical position in Fangio's scheme.
I'm excited to watch him on an NFL field. We've been doing all 22 watch alongs for the Eagles draft prospects for our Patreon, and we did Andrew Makuba last week. Let me tell you, college safety film is atrocious to watch, but I'm ready to see him on an NFL field for sure. So you talked a little bit about the draft, and things obviously change when you're coming off of a championship season. Do you think there was a difference in how the front office approached the draft this time around comparative to other years?
Not so much because of the championship. I don't really think that had an effect on much. I think the contract situation is really the big thing. And because you just, like we're saying, if you can't pay everybody $25 or $30 million and then have money for role players, right? As much as we might love to see them keep Nakobe Dean, if you're paying Zach Bond big money, Nakobe's not going to stick with the Eagles for long because you need somebody else to fill that. And so you bring in a guy like Jihad Campbell. Jihad's now going to sign a 5-year contract, right? Well, Zach Bond in 5 years probably isn't going to be an Eagle. So then Jihad will become the high-paid linebacker, hopefully, and they'll have somebody cheap to pair alongside of him. So you're really having to factor in economics in a way that you didn't have to in the past. If you go back and study the great draft classes, I don't know if you guys are like insane draftics, the 1974 Steelers or the 1986 Niners or the Dallas Cowboys of the Jimmy Johnson era, when you would have these draft classes where you brought in all these players that became either stars or Hall of Famers. There was no economics to it. They went and got really good players, brought them in and played them. And now you have to kind of factor in, where do they fit financially into the paradigm that I've got? And does that allow us to continue to stay successful and not have to go through like some of what San Francisco's gone through this year, where they're letting some guys go that they love. They just can't afford to keep them all, and they're having to try to rebuild on the fly.
Yeah. So of all the offseason moves that the Eagles made, and we can lump free agents into this, so draft picks, free agents, which one stands out to you as the most impactful long-term for the Eagles?
Long-term would be Jihad Campbell, because like I say, as much as I love Zach Bond, and right now, for whatever reason, Zach Bond, just for the minute I heard his press conference when they signed him, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I knew a lot about Zach Bond. I'd watched him coming out of Wisconsin, and I think I had him rated as like a second-round player. I liked him quite a bit, but he was more of an edge rusher there. And he got to the Saints, and I'm not watching a bunch of Saints games. I watched him occasionally. I watched the Eagles play him, but when the Eagles signed him as a free agent, I went and said, all right, let me check this guy. Then he did his press conference. I said, that's a sharp guy. That's an interesting guy. And then they said, we're going to make him an inside linebacker. And I said, huh? Because when I watched him, I really liked him as an edge rusher. I thought he had like a really nice spin move. He seemed like a smart guy. I said, this is interesting. So they said they're going to make him an inside linebacker. And I said, well, all right, Fangio knows more than I do. Let's go ahead and make sure we're all aware of that fact. But then, you watched him against the Packers in that opening game. And you're like, oh, hell, this is cool, man. This guy's flying all over the field, making tackles, making plays. Like it's a great story, but we'll see if that's a 1 week anomaly or something more. And then all of a sudden he turns into this star player and just has an amazing year and blows all the way. But as much as we love him, we know he's only going to be here so long because he's 29 years old now. Football is just, it's not an older guy's game. So Jihad is going to be able to grow alongside him, and then at some point Jihad will become the star linebacker. And if you study Fangio's history, his defense is going back to the Dome Patrol with the Saints in the 1980s. Sam Mills and Vaughn Johnson, those type guys controlling the middle of the field. He's had good linebackers controlling the middle of the field that allows his defense to do what it wants to do. So Jihad, I think, is going to be a really fun player for us to watch over hopefully the next 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, the whole bringing in Zach Bond thing was so bizarre because New Orleans used him as like a bit of a hybrid player, and then they signed him, and he's talking about like he's excited to get back to rushing the passer. Right. And then Vic Fangio is like, he's going to be a linebacker. I was like, did you guys talk before we signed him? What are we doing here? I'm so confused. And yeah, Jonny was on our film review show after the Week 1 Packers game saying extend him now. And unfortunately, the Eagles did not do that. They waited a little too long. But Jonny, is that the same for you? Campbell, the biggest long-term impactful move?
Yeah, just going back, it was hilarious, the Bourne thing. I remember getting it completely wrong and thinking, damn, I wish I could delete articles I published because I wrote about like the minor Eagles free agents. So I didn't do a whole film review for them. And I remember extensively writing about Bourne and saying exactly that. Like, I think the Saints misused him. And I think there's some potential as a pass rusher, as an edge. And then giving these like quotes from his interview where he says he wants to be an edge. And I'm thinking, oh, is it? And then just being completely and utterly wrong in every way because he just became a linebacker straight away. And it was clearly obvious that he was an off-ball linebacker here from day one. I remember Tommy mentioned earlier on the Falcons game. And yeah, that was a wake-up call. And you thought, oh, well, maybe I got this horribly wrong and went too early. But luckily, I didn't get it wrong twice because he ended up being a huge part of the story. I would say that is, to be honest, I could easily give Bourne's, despite as excited I am as about Campbell, I think Bourne's retention is possibly the most important move they did. When you look at the amount of talent they lost, I know it's not a new signing, but they lost a lot of talent. Whatever you think of some of these players, but when you lose Rodgers, Slay, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Oren Burks, Maddox on defense, they just lost a lot. And at some point, they needed to add people, but they also needed to keep some of them in the building for continuity's sake as well. So I would put Bourne up there. There wasn't really like a splash move, was there? If I had to mention one other as well, I'd throw Azeez Ojulari in there as just someone that I'm really interested to watch this year. I think he might have a little bit more potential than some of the other free agents they did, which feel a little bit more like plugging a hole. I think he might have some like legitimate start upside, and I think that he'll get some chance to play. And just really quickly, Shane, I've managed to find it while I was talking. I've gone back to my Bourne thing, and I compared him to Hassan Reddick. And I said, what the hell were the Saints doing? I said he had 12.5 sacks in his final year at Wisconsin. He finally got the chance to rush the quarterback, and he was actually pretty good. When he asked about playing off-ball linebacker, he said this: at times I'd be lying if I wasn't frustrated waiting for my opportunity. And then I said, it's pretty clear to me that Bourne obviously wants to rush the quarterback. He's going to provide the Eagles with depth at edge. And oh, God, that went, it's a great young edge. Yeah, that just went 12 and a half sacks as a senior at Wisconsin. There can't be many players who have 12 and a half sacks as a senior and then come in and become an off-ball linebacker. It was a long time ago, but a very, very strange career arc. The funny thing is, Shane, I don't even really think he got the chance to rush at edge very much last year at all, because Kobe Dean was always the one blitzing. Zach Bourne was often the one that when they ran their sim pressures would stay into coverage anyway. So you've got this like edge potential rusher, but he didn't really ever get the chance to rush on the edge last year either. So it was even weirder. He was just a true off-ball linebacker. And I know he rotated down to edge, but that was often in the running game or dropping into coverage. He rarely just out and out rushed a quarterback as an edge defender. So yeah,
I think he did have 2 sacks in the opening game against.
Yeah, it was early on, wasn't it? Yeah,
and I think he had like 3.5 for the year. So you know, he had 2 sacks, but you're right. Those were still kind of weird blitzes.
Yeah,
and so it wasn't him as an edge rusher. Yeah. And you know, that's a great point about re-signing Zach, because if you watch, and I assume you guys are like I am, every mic'd up type show that they have about the Super Bowl behind the scenes, whatever. You listen, you really come away blown away by him and Saquon, not as players, but as leaders and as people. And the way that they communicated, you know, after there was a play that went, I can't remember, was the interception or something to win against the Eagles, and Saquon comes over the sideline, don't worry about it, don't worry, it's not a big deal. Sirianni's about to lose his mind, and Saquon's calming his coach down, right? And then Bond was the same way, talking to the players, hey, it's good, we're all good, we're all good. And that leadership, man, when we talk about culture, it starts at the top with Sirianni, but then it also, he brings in the right players, he empowers those players, lets them speak up, supports them, gives them a voice. And man, when you have leaders like Bond and Saquon, great players and great leaders, you got a chance to do some really good things. So keeping him, huge move, absolutely a huge move.
Yeah, absolutely. That Jonny and I were both pretty much saying that that's the guy. Like, you had to keep him. If it cost you Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, like, you had to. I would have traded both of them to keep Zach Bond, because that's how important I thought he was to the defense. And I'm glad the Eagles ended up feeling the same way, because I can't imagine losing Zach Bond this offseason.
Yeah, I think Eagles fans would have stormed NovaCare and with pitchforks and torches and said, "Listen, man, call that dude back. He ain't going anywhere." Yeah. Right? He's going to get signed, or there's going to be some trouble.
Yeah.
So thankfully they saved us all that hassle and did the right thing, gave him an extension, and now we get to watch Zach for the next few years. So looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, so when you think about the offseason as a whole, there was a lot of things like, oh, the Eagles could be trading for Myles Garrett. And then at the same time, like, hey, the Eagles might not be able to afford Dallas Goedert, which never made any sense to me, how we're saying those things at the same time. But do you think the Eagles did a good job of balancing like their win now moves with that long-term thing? I've got a thing where, I don't think you want to push all your chips into the table. You just want a Super Bowl. Like, you don't have to go all in on 2025, but you also don't want to be worrying about 2035 right now. Like, you're in a window, you want to maximize that window, and it's kind of a balancing point. So do you think they did a good job of balancing like the win now versus the planning for the short and intermediate future this offseason?
I do, actually. Yeah. And I think part of this, there's a real horrible word here, synergy to this team, in the sense that if you go back to the Peterson era, I don't know that some of the coaches bought into some of the young players, right? And it felt like, much as I love Jim Schwartz, and I did love Jim as a defensive coordinator, great coach and a great storyteller, just a very likable guy. But it felt like if you were one of his guys, that's great. And if you weren't one of his guys, you probably weren't going to play a lot. And you remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, but he brought in like Stephen Tulloch when he was washed up. Mm-hmm. He brought him in for Tennessee, and Stephen Tulloch was terrible for the Eagles. He had the one guy he had as a nickelback that helped the Eagles win in 2017, brought him back in 2018, The guy was just terrible, stunk up the joint. And so he had his favorites that he liked and was maybe overly loyal to some people. And if you think about Fangio's guys are basically good players, right? So Zach Bond became a Fangio guy before he ever shook his hand, right? That's the guy he wanted. Mm-hmm. Jalix Hunt is a guy that Fangio strongly wanted. And Jalix Hunt was a defensive back at Cornell just a couple of years ago, right? Now Fangio is embracing him as a pass rusher for his defense. Fangio instantly took liking to Brandon Graham like every other human being on earth except the opponents. Yeah. Fangio has this thing where he's like, he'll take anybody. It doesn't matter if you're young, old, black, white, tall, thin, short, fat. If he sees that you can help his defense, man, you're one of his guys. And so the Eagles had the ability to play different guys and young guys. I mean, think about the Super Bowl. When Brandon Graham went out after that Rams game, I think we all kind of said, oh, man, they're not deep here because Bryce Huff is having his issues and he's not playing well. He's not healthy. That's a bad combination. Graham's out. What's going to happen here? Josh Sweat struggles to stay healthy. And what does Fangio say? We're fine. We got enough guys. We don't need anything. And we're all trying to figure out who do you go sign from who's on the street that's available? What can you do? Do you move Zach Bond? And Fangio's like, no, we're good. He trusted Jalix Hunt. He trusted Josh Sweat. He trusted his guys to get it done. And then Nolan Smith, he put more on him, and Nolan Smith delivered. So, like I say, Fangio bought into these young players, and I think that's critical. And then on the offensive side, they've done a pretty good job of mixing in young guys when they've needed to as well. And so when you talk about, trying to win now, you have to have coaches that will play the young guys because of like we've talked about, the money and the financial situation. So I think that they've focused more on getting talented players than, because I don't know what you guys thought. Did any part of you want Calais Campbell when he's out there? Are you sitting there talking yourself into he'd be an interesting fit? He's tall, he's productive, he's a good leader. Or are you sitting there saying, let's just see what Moro Ojomo can do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree with that. I kind of had enough of chasing like the older has-been archetype of player. I firmly believe and have for a few years. And I argued that the Eagles were doing this wrong for years, that they would not play young players on the defense. It was like, we're drafting for needs 2 years from now. And it's like these good teams spend money on the offense and they play rookies on defense. And right. It was nice to see the Eagles finally embrace that this last year. And of course, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean really stepped up, and it pays off in dividends. And we'll see if it happens again with guys like Campbell and Andrew Makuba, who probably will factor in quite a bit on defense.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of like having a good culture, scheme, defensive staff is that you should be able to replace guys as well. That's sort of like the whole point of it. The whole idea of having like a Jalen Carter and Zach Bourne is that you trust the Jomo to go and replace Milton Williams. You could even trust someone like Thomas Booker potentially to step up. Then you can go and get Ty Robinson, and he can then step into a Jomo's role. It's almost like the natural way of doing things. I personally love, and I think Howie was very honest about this, how they've tried to not bring it back this year. And they've tried to not just bring all the guys back. They've tried to stay young, but in a weird way, they have ended up bringing a lot of it back. Like the offense is incredibly similar. That's my only one issue I might have about the way they've approached it. And I've said this before, is I wonder if they could have got a little bit more juice on offense. I just think it puts a touch more pressure on people like Jalen Hurts and Kevin Patula to actually come up with something maybe a little bit new, because everyone's going to watch the scheme from last year. And it could be as simple as, you know what, the offensive line is that good. If they know you're running outside zone, who the hell cares? Because we're going to run it anyway. Like it might just be that. But I think the defense is a lot more unpredictable. I think they've got new guys stepping into new roles. I think the only thing I would add on the offense is I wish they had just a couple of more dynamic pieces. And I'm not talking high touch players, and Shane knows I've banged on about this for a while. They're a full 5th round receiver, like an extra running back, and maybe someone a little bit more explosive than AJ Dillon, just to give them a little bit more unpredictability. But the Eagles' offense in the past few years has never been focused on unpredictability. It's just been predicted on we're better than you. And you know what? If Hurts, Barkley, Brown, Smith, Goddard, and the offensive line is still just as good, and Steen does step in and replace Becton and looks just as good, then they might get away with just being like that anyway. And maybe I'm downplaying some of the backup tight ends they signed. Like maybe a Granson or a Harrison Bryant gives you something a little bit extra with your 12 personnel packages as well. But I don't see a lot when I look behind the top guys at running back and receiver.
I'm offended that you don't think Avery Williams is going to be a Hall of Famer after this upcoming season.
Yeah, that's what I'm missing. That's the one.
Come on, man. Come on, Johnny. You're letting me down. Avery Williams. Freaking Sirianni talked to him. The guy is going to go ahead and just buy his plane ticket for Canton, Ohio. He's going in.
Yeah, already. I mean, Will Shipley is going to instantly be better than Kenny Gainwell as well. Everyone's
of course, absolutely, no question
so
about it.
I remain unconvinced on Shipley, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope they do have enough juice outside of the top guys. But I think on defense, they nailed it perfectly. I think they've got just enough like guys coming back, young guys stepping into new roles. They're very unpredictable on defense. Actually, I think anyone really knows what's going to happen with safety, outside corner, edge is a bit of a battle as well. Whereas the offense is very much the same. As I said, maybe they're good enough to handle that. But in general, I like the way they approached the offseason. They didn't bring the guys back. They didn't overpay their own guys this time. Like Milton Williams is a very, very good player, but he is not worth the contract that he got because the Eagles don't need their second defensive tackle to be worth that much money because it defeats the whole object of having a superstar like Carter who makes everything easier for the next guy. So that's exactly how it should be, in my opinion.
Totally agree. And I noticed it was definitely way before your time, but the Dallas Cowboys of the Jimmy Johnson era had an offensive coordinator named Norv Turner. And Norv was a gifted offensive mind. And he came to Dallas, and all of a sudden he had access to a Hall of Fame or an elite running back in Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, a star receiver, Alvin Harper, a good number 2 receiver, Jay Novacek, a star tight end, and a star quarterback. And then he had the best offensive line in football. So he dumbed down the playbook, and they ran simple plays. And you knew on 3rd and 1, it was going to be that play called load left. Emmitt Smith was going to run behind Nate Newton or Larry Allen, and you had to stop him. And most of the time you didn't stop him. And, when Norv Turner went on to other jobs and didn't have players, all of a sudden his playbook open and you see there's reverses and double passes and all this creativity. Because when he had Hall of Fame players, he said, listen, why am I going to make this overly complicated? I'm going to let these guys go play and let them just go downhill. And it's up to you. Stop them when they won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years with that kind of mindset. So sometimes if you have great players, and you're right, Johnny, it's very true. There's some people out there in the film world that want to see the most exotic plays. They want, and that's fun. I get that. That's great for coaching clinics. But the reality is in the NFL, if you're trying to win, sometimes why be as cute as you can? Why draw up the perfect play when you can draw a simple play and Saquon Barkley is going to score a 60-yard touchdown, right?
Yeah.
Why am I going to kill myself for Saquon Barkley to have an 8-yard run when we can run a simple play over and over, perfect it, and we know it's going to lead to a 60-yard touchdown? So, you and I are in agreement kind of with the way the defense is and the offense. It's really tricky to try to figure out what you would do to improve the receiver situation because they have the 2 elite players, and then there's a significant drop-off. But the point, and I've argued this for a couple of years, if you went and got a really good number 3 receiver, he's just not going to get many touches.
Yeah.
So he's going to get frustrated. He's not going to play well. He's not going to be happy. So it's tough. That's where we hope Dotson has a good second year in Philadelphia. And then you hope maybe Aeneas Smith or Johnny Wilson can take a big step forward and show that they've got potential to actually make some plays in offense. They tried to get Wilson to do that last year, and he was just a little bit overwhelmed as a rookie, and Smith just wasn't healthy. So I'm curious to see if one of those guys can take a big step forward.
Johnny's a big Johnny Wilson fan, big believer.
Just because he shares a name. He's being sarcastic.
Said some outlandish things about him last offseason.
Yeah. He's not my type for that kind of receiver. Funny enough, Aeneas Smith is more my type.
I love Smith coming out.
Yeah, so did I. There was something about him, and then I don't know if he was hurt. The 40-yard dash. I know I don't really care much for 40-yard receiver, but he didn't run what I expected him to run. He was like a 4.5, and I was like,
right.
I just want him to be like a 4.4 guy. I know it doesn't make much difference, but for him to succeed in the NFL, I think he needs to be fast. And I worry he doesn't have the juice. But I was all over Aeneas Smith as like the best fit for a Kellen Moore, like gadget guy.
And then they just didn't do gadget things.
They just didn't do it. As Tommy said, why bother? Why bother?
Yeah.
At some point, I like the fact you said, Tommy, about how you mentioned the perfecting plays. I think that's an underrated trait in the NFL as well, is that coaching time's limited, tackling in like off-season stuff's limited. You don't have that much time to practice a ton of stuff. Like there's so many cool run plays, but
well, there's the great Bruce Lee quote: "Don't fear the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks one time. Fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times."
Yeah.
Right?
And the Eagles that's great. Yeah, the Eagles are like that. The Eagles are like that. Unless Gronk Calcaterra is your tight end, then and it's a running play on 1st and 10, and you're running at his side.
They were in trouble.
Yeah, they were in trouble.
I did love it when they threw in the wrinkle and they had Dallas Goedert run in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
That was nice. That's not anything too fancy, but it just was a nice little. It's a way to get him the football, and it was a nice little twist. So I do hope they open things up a little bit. But yeah, you're right. I think the balance they have with their approach is pretty smart. So obviously they won a Super Bowl, but we know more than them. Come on now, we're undefeated. We've never lost a game.
Yeah,
exactly. I've had people tell me before, like when I'm posting all 22 clips, like you should be the offensive coordinator. As like, I don't want all of you guys to hate me because that's what would happen immediately after one game. But also, let's hope Jake Elliott spent the offseason practicing one kick 10,000 times. Let's hope we get that train back on the rails next season.
Yes, sir.
But so looking at the 2025 season, the current roster, what's a position group that you think either took the biggest step forward or you can go the other direction, the biggest step backward, but what position group do you think like is the most different, good or bad, from last year's roster?
The secondary is probably going to be the most different just because of the sheer volume of change. You lose 2 starters in Slay and CJ, and then obviously you don't have Avonte Maddox there as a starter / key backup. So, you're going to have some changes there, and we'll see whether that's Keely Ringo or Adoree Jackson moving outside, and we'll see, what's going to happen at safety. Is it going to be Makuba or Sidney Brown, or is something else going to happen there? Are they going to potentially go after a Justin Simmons or somebody like that? So secondary is where there's been some change. The great thing is the foundational pieces in Quignon and Cooper Jean are in place, and then you have a guy like Reed Blankenship who may not be flashy, but he's steady. And so you've got really key pieces in place, so the other guys can kind of fill into roles, and there's not pressure on them to perform at an elite level, but hopefully they will play well for sure.
Yeah, Jonny, any thoughts on that from you? Defensive backfield, I was leaning defensive line.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm probably like Tommy. I'm probably defensive backfield. It's just such an unknown. I still don't really know what to make of the outside corner either. I know Eric did the great post the other day on Ringo, and we all like the potential there, but then you've got Adoree Jackson who's like the safe option. I think there's just a lot they can do. That's how I would put it. I think Makuba gives them a lot of different ways of playing. And I think he will start, but even if he doesn't start, I think they can use. I'll just mention again that I've been banging the drum about people running more free safety packages for ages, and maybe one day I'll get it. And Makuba does give you a little bit of like versatility if you want to do something different. Just because I haven't fully given up on Sidney Brown. I know everyone has, and I'm not fully there in like he's useless. I think I'm there in that he's not what you hoped he could be, and he might not be a full-time player for you, but I think you should be able to find a way of him playing some meaningful snaps. So I would argue the same as Tori. Sorry to be boring, but I am on the similar wavelength.
Yeah, I had a hard time. I had a hard time deciding if the secondary, like, obviously losing Slay is a big negative loss. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, maybe not. Jonny knows I wasn't enthralled with his play when they had him in 2022 or this last season. So, I mean, I think it's possible we're sitting here in like week 10 and it's like, man, Andrew Makuba is just better than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I think that's a possible outcome. I don't think you're going to have Adoree Jackson or Keely Ringo and be like, man, that's just such an upgrade on Slay. That's probably not going to happen, but I can see the secondary, like, although it's a lot of change, being about the same caliber, maybe. Defensive line for me, though, like, you lose Milton Williams, you lose Josh Sweat. And I know Milton Williams benefited a lot from playing next to Jalen Carter. And I know Josh Sweat wasn't great in the run game, but you also have the retirement of Brandon Graham. And then you don't really address defensive line early in the draft. And so, you know, when I'm sitting here looking at it, I'm just like, I think, Moro Ojomo can probably play more snaps and be productive. And I liked what I saw from Jalix Hunt down the stretch. But if I'm looking for a place that I think there's the biggest like step forward, step back, to me, I think the defensive line probably takes a step back this year. And you hope you make up for it in other areas.
I will say this. So, and Jimmy, I think, wrote something about this somewhere. The Super Bowl probably made us overrate the defensive line a little bit, right? The Chiefs' offensive line was horrific in that game. Like Josh Sweat played his best game in I couldn't tell you how long. And good for Josh. He went and got huge money. Milton Williams played his best game in a long time. He got huge money off that game. Those players are not as good as they looked in that game, right? And I'm not trying to slander them. They were both terrific Eagles, helped us win a Super Bowl, so that's awesome. But, Josh was going up against a left guard playing on the edge and just overwhelmed him. And then they had, I can't remember who they had at left guard going up against Milton Williams, and he was able to get the best of that guy because Tooney's out there at left tackle, right? So he's going up against the backup. And he just overwhelmed those guys. But if you look at the overall season, I mean, Josh Sweat had a good year. Milton Williams had a good year. They're both legitimately good players. But I don't think they were as good as the way they played in the Super Bowl on a regular basis. And so I think while there is going to be some drop-off and some change, I don't think it'll be significant because I think Jalix Hunt is going to take a big step forward. I think the Eagles are hoping Jordan Davis takes a big step forward. I'm not sure what to make of Jordan Davis at this point. I guess I'm more curious than doubting, but we'll see what happens there. Nolan Smith, he's on an upward trajectory. And then they have all these guys that they brought in, Ojulari and then the kid from New England. So they've got all these edge rushers that might be okay. And then we'll see. Moro Ojomo looked really good at times, so I'm excited to see what he can do. And then Ty Robinson, he was a fun player to watch at Nebraska. He had 7.5 sacks last year, good interior rusher, a guy that's a disruptive football player and just has a good motor and a toughness about him. And so I think that the defensive line could be just as good this year. It wouldn't shock me if they were better if some of the young guys take a big step forward.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah. And that's the thing that you can never fully factor in, like how guys are going to progress. So hopefully, and that is something that we do, like, we lost these good players, but you have to factor into other guys getting better. And so, man, I can't wait till football gets here and we can see it. But we talk about the progression and guys getting better. Tommy, who's an under the radar player you think could be a breakout candidate for the Eagles this year?
So I'll throw a really wild one at you. I think Matt Pryor, if we're talking about just players overall and not young players.
Okay.
I think Matt Pryor could be a sneaky guy to watch, right? So he was a starting guard last year for most of the season for the Bears. Not a great offensive line, but if you watch his tape, he is a big, physical, really powerful guy. And Stoutland loves powerful blockers. He talks about grip strength and how he likes powerful hands. Pryor, when he was in as an Eagle early in his career, didn't have experience. So he had the size and the power, but he just didn't know what he was doing. He went away to Indianapolis and Chicago, got to play on some bad offenses and some bad teams, got experience, and he's come back to Philadelphia. And it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being a starting right guard, because that would free up Tyler Steen to be the swing tackle or a backup at other guard spots. And I just wonder if his size and strength and experience is something that Stoutland would give everybody a fair chance. It just wouldn't shock me if he won that role.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't even really thought about that.
I'll be honest, Tommy. That's a hell of a call, because I'm looking at his numbers and I know offensive lineman. I've not watched the film, and in all honesty, I wasn't going to bother, and now I am. It's not a crazy shout. It's a great shout, actually. 1,000 snaps last year, 895 at right guard. Relatively decent pass blocking efficiency. Did give up 7 sacks, but it's offensive line. You need to really watch the film to have a look. But his PFF grades are actually pretty intriguing. That's a really good shout, because and it doesn't sound crazy. It sounded crazy when you said it. I was thinking, did you say Matt Pryor? But I quickly Googled how old Matt Pryor was. I googled quickly how old Matt Pryor was, and it came up an American musician said 46. And I thought that's very old, but it was the wrong Matt Pryor. He's actually born in the same year as me, Matt Pryor. So if anyone says he's too old, then I'll take that as a personal insult. The good old 94 born. But yeah, his numbers are. Yeah, I didn't realize he started, Tommy. I've obviously, you know what it's like in the NFL world. You're following everything so closely. Storylines you sort of end up ignoring a few stories. I just didn't even. I'll be honest, I didn't even consider that. He was the PFF's 22nd, Shane, best guard last year, if you look at a minimum of 20% snaps. Becton was 17th. So he was very similar to Becton, and he played a lot of snaps. 34th best run blocking and 5th best pass blocking. Wow, he had the 5th best pass blocking grade of any guard per PFF. Wow.
He gave up 7 sacks.
You gave up 7 sacks, but then when you look, I know, but you never, again, you got to look at the sacks having new context. He gave up no quarterback hits. No, apparently. So 7 sacks. Maybe it was one of those things where every time he got beat, it was unlucky, but the guy ended up hitting the quarterback. Yeah, I mean, when you look at pressures, considering how many snaps he played, as I mentioned, his efficiency was good. Like, I'm going to go and now watch Matt Pryor, Tommy. I'm intrigued. I'm not saying he's going to be the next best thing, but I have never been... Steen scared me the end of last year. He played very, very limited snaps. Right. I've said this to you before, Shane. I didn't watch him and think that's the guy. And I've also been convinced that the Eagles might want this big guy at guard. Steen's numbers were not very good last year. I know he only played like 300 snaps, but they weren't. Again, PFF, take it what you will, but I normally think offensive linemen's relatively straightforward in terms of just simply looking at, did someone protect the guy or give up a hit, etc., etc. And he doesn't grade that well. And I think the Eagles are in the business of giving players jobs based on where they drafted them. I think this organization will give everyone a fair crack, and they obviously like Matt Pryor. I said that's a shout, Tommy. You need to write an article on Matt Pryor, because maybe you haven't. I've missed it, a full one. But that's a really interesting shout that I have not heard. Yeah, interesting.
Well, I'm glad I brought something good to the show. So
yeah, I mean, good. I thought you'd lost it first time, Tommy. As I said, when I had Matt Pryor, had 1,000 snaps. And by the way, Chicago was a bit of a mess as well. So he did relatively well for a team that were a bit of the stories coming out about Chicago. They were a mess offensively, like a real mess, and their offensive line was a mess. And I always think that does not help if you're playing for a team that are not very good.
Absolutely,
895 snaps at right guard
Think about Mekhi Becton. What did you do with Mekhi Becton? You took a big guy who had struggled and had been on a dysfunctional offensive line. You put him into a functional spot between a Hall of Fame right tackle and a star young center. Gave him stability. Gave him good offensive coaching, good skill players around him, and the guy had the best season of his career. So you could be looking at them going with a cheaper, older version of Mekhi Becton, similar size. He's a guy who's got more experience, has less ceiling, less upside, but has more experience and knows what he's doing and has worked with Stoutland before. So, like I say, it wouldn't shock me, but we'll see. And I think your point is totally right. Stoutland isn't picky, right? He wants the best 5 players. And if that means that's Tyler Steen, if that means that's Drew Kendall or some rookie, whatever, man. He wants the best 5 players. So he'll give everybody a fair shot, and it's up to them to show what they can do.
Yeah. So, yeah, next week, Johnny, I guess we're watching Matt Pryor film. Digging into
4
Chicago
hours
film.
Incoming. Yeah. Guess what's that? Oh, I got to watch the Bears offense. Oh, no, maybe I won't. I'm just going to take Tommy's word for it. I'm not sure I can watch that Bears offense. It's awful. Watch receivers trot around, not expecting the ball. Yeah. I might watch it from the one angle where I can only see the offensive lineman. And that's the move. I want to see anything else. The stories about that. It's just podcast for another day. It's rough.
Well, so Tommy, do you think the Eagles their roster is built for a repeat shot in 2025? And how do you think they kind of stack up to the other top contenders in the NFC right now?
So I do think this team is built to take another run at another Super Bowl. Absolutely. And I'm a big one for looking back at history. And so if you look back to the 2017 team, that team won the Super Bowl. And at the time, I remember thinking, all right, this team's is in good shape. They can make another run. But then if you think, a little trivia question. Do you guys remember who the leading rusher for the 2018 Eagles was?
Do I want to? I think it's not like Josh Adams or someone laughing, is it?
Exactly. Josh Adams.
Yes.
So a UDFA running back was the leading rusher, right? and the receivers weren't as good. The defense took a step back. They had some issues. There was the one, I can't think of the dude's name, the nickelback that they had that just Patrick Robinson had gone. Corey Graham. Yeah. I said nickelback. He actually played safety in nickel. Corey Graham had been a good role player for the 2017 defense. It was just dreadful in 2018. He gave up a completion on 4th down against the Titans that still I wake up sweating every now and then thinking about how bad that play was. And that team had too many old players and awkward players and role players. The 2025 Eagles have Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata. There is a real strong core on offense. And then you look at the defense, and there's still Jalen Carter, arguably the best defensive tackle in football. Zach Bond, arguably the best linebacker in football. Quinyon Mitchell, the best Quinyon in football. Cooper DeJean, there are some real good players. And so you're not asking role players to step up. And if Josh Adams, if Will Shipley becomes the leading rusher this year, guess what? The Eagles ain't winning the Super Bowl, right? So we learned that Josh Adams lesson hard in 2018. But this team, I think, has the players to get the job done and to be a good team. Are they going to have some dominant efforts like last year? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. I am curious to see if Jalen Hurts and that offense can stay hot the way they did at the end of the year. If that carries over, then the offense could be maybe better than a defense this season. How fun would that be? And as to how they stack up, I think that the Lions are going to be good, but they've lost 2 coordinators. I think the Commanders are going to be good, but I'm not a huge fan of the way they've addressed the offseason. They've gone for older guys. They're in win now mode, and I'm just not 100% sure that I like a lot of their decisions. And then you look around the rest of the league, and who knows what to make of San Francisco. You can make a case that if this move pans out, that move pans out, then that's a 12-win football team. But you can also make a case that, hey, if these guys can't stay healthy, which they haven't for the last few years, then that's a 6 or 7-win football team. So to me, I put the Eagles, Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, on a different level. And then right after that, I guess probably Detroit and in Washington somewhere in there, but it should be another fun season. If the Eagles stay healthy, man, they got a real chance to compete for a championship.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to look at with like Detroit, how they're going to do replacing 2 coordinators. We saw how that went for the Eagles. And with Washington, how is Jaden Daniels going to do in year 2? And Cliff Kingsbury's had a tendency to fade over the second half of seasons in his career, going back all the way even to college. Right. And it didn't happen last year, but it's like, can he sustain it for a second year? So I think there's some interesting questions in the NFC that will be really interesting to see how they play out. But last question for you, Tommy. Is there a roster move that you would like to see the Eagles make before week 1? And if so, what would that be?
Am I allowed to bring back Reggie White?
Only if you have a time machine. I don't know that works out otherwise.
Yeah, probably would be awkward. So, as I look at the roster, I think I like the Eagles' depth at most spots. I guess running back is a little bit of a curiosity. I'm a big fan of A.J. Dillon, so I like having a sledgehammer back there, and I think Will Shipley can be a good 3rd down back. But if anything did happen to Saquon and he was out for a month, things would become a little strange. But I think running back's one of those places where you can maybe find help even during the season. There's going to be somebody on the street that you could sign and find someone. So I'm okay there. I guess defensive tackle would be one spot where I wonder if they maybe need one more body. Because I think they kind of got lucky last year that they didn't run into issues. Those guys stayed healthy despite playing a lot of snaps. And then, of course, they had the playoff games that they had to go through, and there's a lot of snaps in those games. So you just wonder if you can sit there and say Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Ojomo, Ty Robinson. Can we count on Thomas Booker if we had to play significant snaps? Do we think Gabe Hall is going to make a big step forward? Do we think Byron Young is going to do anything in his? A lot of people forget he's an Eagle. They had former 3rd-round pick, from Alabama. So if they feel confident, those guys, then that's fine. But if they don't feel confident, it wouldn't shock me maybe if they said let's bring in a veteran defensive tackle in like late August or something like that.
All right, Johnny, any move you would like to see the Eagles make?
You already know, Shane. You don't need to hear me waffle too much. I know Tommy's right about the receiver, but I would like an offensive chess piece. I don't care. Running back receiver hybrid. Don't care. 3 or 4 touches a game. Just someone a little bit more juice. That would be my ideal sort of extra receiver. And again, it doesn't have to be a specific player, not to use the Jags term of like offensive weapon going back years, but someone on offense that can do a few different roles and maybe create something explosive. That's what I would really like for the offense personally.
So what about Ty Robinson? You just have him be your offensive chess piece.
Yeah.
Nebraska had him playing fullback.
Yeah,
we've already got one of those though.
You watch some of those snaps. So what about a backfield where he's the fullback and then you're handing the ball to Ben Van Sumeren, right?
I'm just waiting for that Ben Van Sumeren touchdown when he catches one in the flat.
Oh, absolutely.
What a
right?
day. Eagles Twitter is going to explode.
What I hear is that we need the power I formation. We got 2 fullbacks, Ty Robinson, Ben Van Sumeren, lead blocking for Saquon Barkley.
What? Whoa, my man! You just missed it. If we want to go real power I, they need to bring Jordan Mailata from his Australian rules football days, rugby days. Put him as the tailback. Have those guys lead blocking for him, and then just let's just let the beauty unfold. Football Twitter would be on fire.
I have wanted since they drafted him for them to run like a tackle overplay where he catches a pass in the flat and just see what happens. It'd be awesome.
I don't know if you guys remember this. Lane Johnson was a quarterback in junior college.
Yeah.
Right? So we could have Lane Johnson take the snap. He's got the 2 fullbacks blocking and then he hands to the big man. I mean, this is football heaven right here, right? This is what we want. Let's get some 300-pound butt kickers back there. And then forget about tush push. Let's just run all over Frankie Louvu and the rest of the Commanders.
Yes. Yeah, the tush push gets banned. And so the first time the Eagles play the Commanders, we get a 3rd and short. And you end up with the dual fullbacks in the backfield with Lane Johnson running an RPO where he either hands it to Jordan Mailata or throws the slant to A.J. Brown.
I love it. I love it. Listen, man, it'd be worth it. I want to see that. Let's get creative.
Yeah. Despite the fact we earlier talked about not being creative and just letting the good players win. But this is why we're not offensive coordinators, guys. But it is really fun to think about.
We're drunk on big guy touchdowns. So
the scheme guys would love it.
Oh,
the Eagles score 1 touchdown that game. I love this new Eagles offense, man.
Every former offensive lineman on Twitter would just be going nuts. Yeah, they love fat guy touchdowns. So the thick 6, I think they call it.
Yeah.
So they'd be in hog heaven now. That'd be a lot of fun if you could experiment with fun stuff like that, man.
We would draw that up, and Lane Johnson would make a bad read and throw an interception, and would be run out of Philadelphia immediately.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they'd be like, "Who are these idiots? What are they? Lane Johnson's a quarterback." We'd be banished permanently.
I think this show has officially jumped the shark, gentlemen. This is what happens when you get to the end of the rundown. We just go back to what we chat about before we click record. But this was awesome, Tommy. Thanks for joining us. Really interesting to get your perspective on the offseason on this year, and some homework from you as well that I need to go back and watch some Matt Pryor, because that wasn't really on my radar, but now I can't stop thinking about it. So but you guys, be sure you are following Tommy on Twitter at Lawlor NFL. Check out his written work at eaglesblitz.com. And Johnny, we're gonna have to get Tommy on the show some more. I heard him say that he wanted to do some more podcasting, so we might have to get him back on the show.
Yeah, we know a place if you ever fancy it. Seriously, it's you've given me some homework, which is the bad news. But yeah, you talk as well as you write, which is the biggest compliment I can say, because I've read your stuff for goodness knows how many years. So we really do appreciate it.
I appreciate it, fellas, and it's been fun talking to you two. Nothing better than a team in Philadelphia to get a guy from England, Oklahoma, and North Carolina together to talk about him.
Perfect. Twitter
it's
will
the beauty
love
of the NFL, right?
It's the perfect fit. So Well, that is going to do it, guys. Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you enjoy the show, be sure you click the subscribe button. 5-star ratings and reviews on the Eagles Pinpool Network are all greatly appreciated to help us get the show out there. You can also check out Jonny and I's Patreon at patreon.com/ontheshane page. We'll have some Ty Robinson all 22 watch-alongs coming out in the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. We will catch you guys next time. Go Birds.